Hey Tony, hi Garrett. Do you ever feel stressed out? Well, I am working on the second part of my series. Are you stressed out? Hi, I'm Kathryn Vaughan, and this is To Your Health. I'm standing in front of the Spicer Center, which is a multi-specialty mental health center here in Manchester. And in a moment, we're going to go sit down with co-founder Sherri Alper, who's also a psychotherapist, and we're going to talk about stress and how it affects us emotionally and psychologically. You know, stress is such a major part of our lives, and we really have to learn how to manage it. So a lot to talk about. Let's get started. Well, here we are. We're with Sherri Alper, and thank you very much for joining us. It's nice to see you again.
You're welcome. It's nice to be here.
Well, you know, stress is a really big topic, and what I'm doing is a two-part series. And today, with your knowledge and expertise, I really want to talk about stress and how it affects us emotionally and psychologically. You know, there is a statistic that we're talking about that 80% of office visits to a primary physician are stress-related. That's a large number. Do you find that correlation in your practice and your clients?
Absolutely. And in fact, most of our referrals actually come from physicians who encounter people in their practices who come with somatic complaints of one kind or another. And there's nothing physically wrong, but the person says, I just don't feel good. I know something's wrong. And so we usually end up seeing those people, and probably a very large percentage of the time they turn out to be suffering from stress and the ongoing pressures of modern life in Manchester as we know it.
The Mecca. You know, so with the stress, I mean, if you break it down, and I'm going to break it down simple just for trying to make simplicity out of it. We have acute stress and we have chronic stress. So would you be kind enough to share us the difference between the two?
Sure. Acute stress happens when there is a catalyst, an incident that upsets the normal equilibrium. For instance, we sometimes get called by area employers if there's been an accident on site, or if an employee has died suddenly, or clients come into our counseling agency following an automobile accident. So anything that's catastrophic and normally upsets the normal balance of family life is considered acute stress. Chronic stress is just as insipid and just as troublesome. It's usually not triggered by one incident. It's usually a collection of small, everyday things. I like to refer to it as Chinese water torture, one drip at a time. And it's life as we know it, the kids, the family, the checkbook, the income, the dog vomiting on the floor.
And that puts you over, you know.
And that's the one that puts you right over the edge.
So, okay, so acute that's interesting though, how companies will bring you in to talk about that, because something that I also read is that if you talk about a stressful situation, sort of like immediately upon that situation, it helps diffuse the flight, stress hormone release, right? Something like that?
Absolutely. And what's interesting is you don't even really have to do much. For instance, a couple of years ago, we were called to an area secondary school after a student had committed suicide. And the goal there was to do what's called a critical incident stress debriefing. And that's actually a psychological program for going in after there's been a crisis that induces stress in the system and diffusing it, debriefing it. All debriefing entails is listening. Get those who witnessed or those who were involved to talk. And you don't have to fix it. In fact, that's contraindicated. You just listen as each person describes what their experience was. What did they witness? What did they know? What are they thinking? And that puts them on the road to healing. There hopefully will be follow-up after that. But we know that talking about it instead of secrecy helps.
You know, interesting point, because let's take that into our private lives. Let's say in your family. And something is happening where it's stressful. Somebody lost their job. Okay, so obviously that's huge financially. The kids, everything has just been stopped in its tracks in the household. And as somebody who wants to talk about the stress, it's not necessarily important to try to fix it, because we always want to help to fix our friends. If they have a problem, well, we can do this, we can do that. Is it more important sometimes just to listen to it and let them play it out?
Exactly. I like to say to people, Don't just do something, stand there. And if you can just tolerate the feelings, the physical sensations, etc., and know that nothing immediately catastrophic is going to happen, later we'll come up with solutions and start working behaviorally, etc. But immediately, the first clue to handling stress is to recognize it. And very often when we're stressed ourselves, we don't recognize our own stress. It takes a co-worker or a friend to say to us, "You look like..."
Not so good.
Expletive deleted. What's the matter? And you'll say, "Oh, I do? What? Everything's fine." And then you go into the bathroom and think, everything is not fine. And if it's that noticeable, I better do something about it.
Right. So then, how do we sort of, well, okay, I want to ask this question too. From that point, how do you know from talking about it to then almost obsessing about it? It's like when you have a problem, you're mad at something and you call a friend, and then you talk it through, then you call another friend, and then next week you talk to another friend and talk about the same topic. It sort of repeats itself. You revisit the same thing. Is it more about just having playtime and airtime, or is it and it almost, you revisit that anger or the frustration that you had? When do you know when to let that go? Say, I can't go there any longer.
Well, there is what we like to refer to as the ain't it awful syndrome. You go to work and you're complaining about the boss, and you go to one colleague and say, "Ain't it awful? It really is horrible to work here. I can't stand it another minute." Then that person goes down 3 notches in mood and goes to someone else and says the same thing. And pretty soon, ain't it awful is around the poisoning the whole environment. The problem is that stress is contagious. And so taking ownership of your own stress once you've recognized it or once someone else points it out to you is really important. And we see this, by the way, in families all the time. When parents are stressed, kids start to pick up on it. Kids start to have trouble in school. They start to have nightmares. They can't sleep very well at night. And we know it's time to intervene in the system and see what we can do to reduce the stress and get everyone back on a healthier plane.
You know, that's really interesting, as you say, stress is contagious, because there's sometimes you ever walk into an environment where you just really want to walk out of because you can just feel the kinetic energy that's going on.
Absolutely.
And so how do people know they have to walk into the environment because it's a work related and they don't have an option to find new work at the time? How do they not take it upon themselves where they just sort of walk in and go, "Oh my God, this is just going to own me today, and I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be upset just for that, not even whatever else is going to come along in the workplace." How do you manage that? What are some key things that we can say to ourselves, "Okay, this is not going to affect me, and I'm going to do this"?
Self-talk has, even though we all make fun of it, is very effective in reducing stress. Saying, "It'll be okay. I can handle this. It's not a big deal." A couple of years ago, there was a book called "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff," and the subtitle was "And It's All Small Stuff." And when we learn that probably 99% of everything is small and we don't have to make it into a catastrophe, then we're all right. There's another trick that's very useful to people, and it's called the "and then what" trick. So you come in to me and you're all stressed and you say, "I can't stand it. You know, my son didn't do his homework and he left it on the table and the teacher gave him a detention and I'm so worried and that something horrible will happen." Okay, Kathryn, he left his homework on the table and the teacher gave him a detention. And then what? Well, maybe he gets another detention. And then what? And maybe somebody at school helps him get more organized. And then what? And if you do "and then what" long enough, it's, oh, he's not going to turn into a juvenile delinquent because he left his homework on the table.
You know, those are very, very wise words, everyone, because it's very much like that. So with this, what could you offer us some words of wisdom with stress and how we can, as we wrap up, how can we guide ourselves through this?
Well, the first is to realize that being stressed in isolation is probably one of the worst things that anyone can do. That's why support groups are so useful. For instance, support groups around an illness that's stressful, or bereavement support groups. All of these psychological reactions that we always encounter, all of us in life, involve some stress, and sharing it, like sharing anything else, is a huge help. And so probably the wisest thing you can do is talk about it with someone trusted, a friend, whatever, a clergyman, a doctor, a therapist. It almost doesn't matter who. And then take some of the behavioral steps that I know you talked about last time with Mary McVean to actually become proactive about managing stress so that it doesn't reoccur, it doesn't poison your life.
Right. Such wise words, you know. Again, it's a big topic, and there's so much more to talk about this. I think we're going to have to do a part 3 sometime soon, because it's just bigger. Because the more information that we can offer and give out to people, the better they'll be. So I want to thank you very much, Sherri, for being with me this afternoon.
You're welcome. It was fun.
Yes, and we'll have to have part 3.
Okay,
All
you're
right.
on.
Thanks.
Take care.
I'm Kathryn Vaughan, and this is To Your Health.